All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from Explicit Instruction Academy on lessons plans. My name's Nick Roy. I work at Ancora Publishing and Safe and Civil Schools. I'll be the webinar host today. You can message me or send me a chat or a message in the Q&A if you have any technical difficulties during the webinar. Sometimes I can help. And also, we're going to be using the Q&A to have some back and forth with Anita. She will prompt us through the webinar to get some questions asked and answered. So that is to the very right-hand screen of your WebEx interface. There's a right column with all that stuff. It says Q&A. You just kind of type in your answer there, hit send. You can select who you send it to. You can send it to all attendees or just to Anita and I. Please know that the webinar is being recorded, so if you have to leave, we will be sending it out later so you can catch what you missed. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anita.
Thank you, Nick, and welcome to all of you. I love the fact that I get to talk about this topic. Now, I know it's not the most exciting webinar topic that we've had, but it's an issue out in school districts. And so this is on lesson plans. And basically, the big idea is one form does not fit all. In fact, sometimes we don't even need a form. So we are going to look at this in a broader perspective. The challenge that I find when I go to do demonstrations, and I went through hundreds of lessons that I have on my computer for when I did do demonstrations, and drew what we're doing today from those situations. But they will send me the idea that I'm to teach, and they'll send, here's our lesson page. Please fill it in for each part of the lesson where there is a new objective. Well, sometimes I find that it is a little bit laborious, a little bit inefficient, and that we really need a better way of thinking about the purpose of lesson plans and then how to make them both effective and efficient. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And happy holidays to all of you, because it is upcoming days very, very soon. So this is our, and let me get that back up. And for some reason, I'm not able, there we go. So we're on December 13th. And this is the Explicit Instruction webinar. I was recently asked, could we show this to any of these two people on our staff? Of course. They're for you to disseminate, and Nick will put them up online for you soon, and so you could do that. So I sent you this little brief explanation of today, and it came directly from an administrator that I had in the summer TOT, and said this: our district requires written lesson plans submitted a week in advance. What form would you recommend? Now today, as I went through all the lessons from different districts that I'd worked in, I did put up some potential forms, and you have them as a doc file and a PDF file so that you could alter them and use them. So you're getting the PowerPoint and PDF and a doc file and a PDF for this session. And as I said here, this is it seems like a simple question, but it's not a simple answer. And that is what we're going to explore today. So as I think about this, I want us to take a moment and think about what would be the purposes of writing out lesson plans. So I'm teaching a social studies lesson, I write out a lesson plan. I am teaching at middle school language arts, my perspectives, I write out a lesson plan. So if I did that act, what would be the purpose of it? So hop over to your chat, think about it, and put in what you would envision would be the purpose, and go. Okay, so our first answer up is to organize. Welcome, Bill, and I agree with you. Definitely helps us organize what we have as intent very systematically for our students. And let's see if we have more answers. so that we would know the goals that we had set as well as the criteria. So, Kim, you're probably thinking about learning intentions and success criteria. Very good reason. And Jodelle said to keep on track over time. So if I had a unit that I was writing, maybe in science, that one lesson would build on the next, and the next, and I could keep track of that. Great. I'm going to take 2 more, so type away. And making sure that we are meeting all students and their needs. And so that we certainly could have within our lesson plan adaptations for specific groups or individual students. And Ivalani said, plan out to assure that we are addressing active participation, good job, higher level questions, good job, and elements of explicit instruction. Warm my heart, Ivalani, so thank you. Well, I did the same brainstorming, and my answers were very close to yours, though you went a little beyond it. So I said, 1, and this one's always first, I'm going to plan this instruction to promote learning. And that's always our goal. We always keep our eye on that goal. And I'm going to write out lesson plans so that I can ensure that I'm teaching critical content. And just as many of you said, to be certain that I have in mind what the desired outcome is. What is the learning intention? What is the parallel success criteria? And as already mentioned, I also want to have lesson plans so I have an organized path to that desired outcome. And once again, to promote learning, because the whole purpose is sort of like a doctor writing out a prescription and having the prescription that leads to health rather than death. And so it is always keeping our eyes on that intentionality of learning. So those are exactly what we want. And we've always looked at this preparation, thinking about the critical content, what is the outcome, what are the paths there, and we've always thought about it in terms of writing lesson plans. But today I want to challenge that because there may be some ways that are equally effective, but maybe more efficient depending on the actual materials that we are using, a curriculum. You know, and I wanted to start out with one of my favorite new books, Creating the Schools That We Need by Dylan William. And in one of his chapters, chapter 9, Why Curriculum Matters, he starts out with this. What makes things really challenging, in the United States at least, is that many people assume that standards, whether state or federal level, define a curriculum. Now, of course, words can be defined in any way we choose, but it's helpful to distinguish between what we want students to know at the end of certain periods of instruction, standards, and the experience that schools organize to get them there, curriculum. So we're going to be using that vision that standards are not a curriculum, that standards tell us where we're going, but they don't tell us the path that we're going to take to get there. Then I'm going to read you just the last little bit of the same chapter, just to get you interested in getting it on your Hanukkah or Christmas list. The big mistake that we have made in the United States, and indeed in many other countries, is to assume that if we want students to be able to think, then our curriculum should give our students lots of practice in thinking. This is a mistake because what our students need is more to think with. The main purpose of curriculum is to build up the content of long-term memory so that when students are asked to think, they are able to think in more powerful ways because what is in their long-term memories makes their short-term memories more powerful. That is why curriculum matters. All right, so good book for the holidays, right? We have 2 people from Hawaii, so they'll be at the beach reading it. Rest of us will be looking at snow. So when I stopped and looked at this, I said to myself, the reason that we have to even have this webinar to think about lesson plans is that the materials differ a great deal in terms of what they provide for us in terms of planning a lesson. So we're going to look at very highly structured curriculum, and we find those mostly in intervention, where most of the elements that we might want in terms of lesson plans are already embedded, already provided in the materials. And things like corrective reading or rewards, phonics for reading, foundations by Wilson, and many other programs that actually have a developed curriculum, not just the standards where we want to go, but the curriculum, how we're going to get there. And many of these elements are present there. So what should we do then in terms of preparation? Then we have what I just called lightly structured curriculum. And this just simply means that they had more choices. For example, this last spring, I worked on an adoption committee that picked my perspectives at the middle school level for language arts. And that program is not scripted out, but it has this outcome with this path and these suggested procedures. But there's options that the teacher would have, things that they could do that would be different in that situation. A program like Journeys, a reading program, or Wonders would have that kind of flexibility within it, but it would have a great deal of structure. And then sometimes when I have gone to teach, they'll say, well, Archer, here is a read aloud. Please teach the read aloud. So they give me the text, but everything around the text I have to create in terms of the lesson. And so that could be a read aloud. It could be social studies. Here's the chapter in social studies, but what are you going to do before or during and after reading of that text? And then sometimes I will get, here is the objective. Students will be able to write a paragraph that is coherent. That's it. So then I have to create everything. So it seems to me that this is important because the type of lesson plans that a district or an administrator might wish to see should differ by the curriculum that is being used. So let's just look at that. So for example, maybe we have a highly structured curriculum. And again, often in interventions. Maybe it's even a scripted program. And there, instead of writing out lesson plans for every activity, which would be laborious, which would be inefficient, instead, we might do just a weekly plan of these are the activities that we're going to cover, or in a unit we're going to cover. So, and we're going to even look at total options, such as carefully reading the manual and doing annotations in it. We might have a lightly structured curriculum. And today, one of the examples I'm going to use is Wonders, because I worked on an adoption committee that adopted Wonders last spring. And they have many activities, which you have some freedom of which ones you're going to do, and they give you directives of things you might do, but it's not scripted every word, and so you have more input into it. And you might, in that case, instead of writing lengthy lesson plans, you might actually annotate your teacher's manual. You might write notes in it. You might highlight it, because you're going to prepare, you're going to know the outcome, you're going to know how to get there, but maybe it is not through writing a lesson plan. But then there comes times when you get this text or this read aloud. And I had probably 100 read alouds on my computer that I could look at. And so you get a read aloud and here's your content. Well, I'm going to have to create a whole lesson around that, and a lesson plan might be very, very helpful. And the same thing when I'm given an objective. Oh my goodness. So I have the objective, but I don't have a path to get there. I don't know the steps I'm going to use. I don't know what vocabulary I'm going to teach. I better really in-depth plan it. So the error I see in districts sometimes is, as I did with many principals this last summer, we have a district format for lesson plans, and no matter which of these you have, you're going to do that lesson plan. But these are very different levels of planning. It's maybe I use a little analogy. So some people realize I'm at home this week, which is lovely, and I'm in my kitchen, and I am actually having dinner guests. And so after I got online here, I had about 15 minutes, and I was getting out recipes, and I was cooking. But there's a different level of planning if we said, we're going to go out to dinner. That is like no planning, except picking the right restaurant. Maybe I'm going to go to a nearby deli, and then I'm going to have to pick out the right foods to put together for a meal, but they're all prepared. Or maybe I am going to have a meal where I have an entree tonight, and I have a salad, and I have a vegetable, and I have a dessert, and I am going to have drinks, and I'm going to have wine. Oh, my goodness. And see, that's the same thing. It's not one plan. It's varied plans. And this cannot be one plan. This has to be varied plans. So I'm just going to put this in your head, what I've done with these districts when they ask this question. If they have, and often by contract, that there'll be some kind of lesson plan, that they actually sort of negotiate with the language arts department. Oh, you just got my perspectives. Let's look at the requirements for lesson plans and how that might be best carried out with what you're doing. Oh, you just adopted a intervention program, and maybe the intervention program is corrective reading, which has many activities in it. It wouldn't make sense for you to write a little lesson plan for every one of those activities. Let's look at what our big intention was, that you knew the outcome, knew how to get there, and figure out a way to document it so that you're meeting the goal of the district, but it is effective and efficient. So let's look at some examples. So I hope this is useful to you. I certainly learned a lot by doing it myself, by thinking through this. But first, a little bit of retrieval review, because we are doing this from the perspective, just as like Evelani, you did in your response, the perspective of explicit instruction. So some review items. So when we looked at the structure of a lesson, and it has an opening, a body, and a closing, there were some things that we would include in an opening. And so using your chat box, I want you to type in some things that we would expect to see in the opening of a lesson. Ooh, good job. So we had preview, review. Ooh, nice. Review and setting expectations. Absolutely. And a preview, which included the goal of the lesson. Great. Okay, I'm looking for one more answer. And Mary Jo said, you're going to get their attention. Beautiful. So you're going to get their intention, review, preview, including the goal. Perfection. And in the review, we might activate or teach the basic background knowledge needed, and we could activate prior knowledge or teach them the background knowledge. Well, very close to what I had. So in the opening, preview, review, and I just pulled out from the preview the goal, which you can state, we have no data to show one goal method is better than another, but you might use learning intentions and success criteria. and we might relate it even to the standards. And the review could be a review of the necessary pre-skills for today. It could be a review of content from the past that we wanted to maintain. What a beautiful job. Then we had a body. And if I was teaching you some knowledge, what would you want to remember about that? So I present the information, but there were 4 words that told us what we needed to do to ensure that the knowledge would move from working memory to permanent memory. So type those in. I'll give you a hint here because Amy used it earlier. I'm going to be certain that the kids will attend. So we're thinking knowledge here. I want them to attend. I want them to intend. I want them to rehearse. And I want them to retrieve. And Kim, you had it. Attend, intend, rehearse, and retrieve. Let's all practice that together. I want them to, and here I'll show it to you so that you have it visually. I've presented information, but I've got to give you practice in it. So I'm going to have you attend. I'm going to have you intend. I'm going to have you rehearse, and I'm going to have you retrieve. So maybe I'm teaching science and I'm teaching mostly knowledge. Maybe I'm teaching social studies. I'm teaching knowledge. Maybe I'm teaching a high school health class. I'm teaching knowledge. And I want them to attend, intend, rehearse, and retrieve. Perfect. And we're also teaching skills or strategies. So Amy, pull up your answer because it would be perfect here. If I am teaching you a skill or strategy, there were 3 steps that have really a long history of usefulness when we teach a skill or strategy. So let's see you pull that up. Just giving you a little visual hint. And terrific. So Amy, you already had this. Now Kim has it. So demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. Ivalani, that's right. I do it. We do it. You do it. Practice it with me. I do it. We do it. You do it. Why is this important? Well, if I'm going to write a lesson plan to teach a skill or strategy, I'm going to have to address I do it, demonstration, we do it, guided practice, and you do it, checking for understanding. So right on. And let's just show you that that is in your notes. I do it, we do it, you do it, or the original wording by Madeline Hunter, demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. Well, we might be teaching vocabulary. In fact, in math we teach vocabulary, in language arts we teach vocabulary, in science and social studies. And if we were going to look at a number of steps that we would use to teach a vocabulary term using explicit instruction, what would those include? Okay, so let's go directly to feedback. And so what might we need in vocabulary? Well, first, we're going to have to pick the words. And good job. Pick the words, and we're going to introduce the pronunciation. And then we're going to give them a student-friendly definition for the meaning, as you have, Kim. And then we're going to illustrate it with some examples. And we might just oppose that to non-examples and check their understanding. So if I was writing a lesson plan for vocabulary, I would have to have a definition, I'd have to have examples, and I might need non-examples, and then a way to ask questions to check their understanding. So the point here is that our knowledge of explicit instruction would direct what we need in terms of the curriculum, the path there to that goal. And so depending if we're teaching knowledge, or if we are teaching a skill or strategy, or if we're teaching vocabulary. Well, and we need a close of the lesson too, which we might go back and review critical content and big ideas, and might give them an idea of what we're doing tomorrow, and also might give them homework or in-class work. So just our study of explicit instruction has informed us of the kind of elements that we would want to see in a lesson plan. And there's a few other things too. Now, this one I wrote out because oftentimes you are given like a read aloud. And the question is, what might you do before, what you might do during reading of it, what you might do after it. Or maybe you're going to watch a video. Recently, I watched a video with middle school students on plant reproduction. And before we did it, before we watched that video, I front-loaded it with some vocabulary and background knowledge and previewed what we were going to see. And during it, they were to take notes, Cornell notes, topic and detail, and sometimes we stopped the video just so that they could take time to take notes. And then afterwards, we had a discussion about it. So this is another way to organize if I'm going to have them read something or watch a video, or maybe I'm going to verbally present information. I can organize it by before, during, and after. This little video, this little slide would be useful to your social studies, science, health teachers. Okay, so, but we might in our lesson plan want some formative assessment, and we want, well, what are the resources I need? Is it the text I need? Is it other materials, a worksheet? Is it pencils or pens? Is it markers? Are we going to use technology? Are we going to get out our iPads? And always keeping in mind active participation. Even one of you had that earlier. What kind of active participation strategies am I going to use? All right, 3 case studies here just to illustrate how we might have to look at lesson plans in a much more flexible way to really make them work so that they would optimize learning. So, 3 real experiences. So one day I am in a 5th grade class, an intervention class, and they have sent me that I'm going to teach the first lesson in the rewards program. Well, now, that kind of excited me because since I was one of the senior author of rewards, I thought, okay, I think I could do this pretty well. And then they said, but in our district, this is the requirement for an intervention. So they had a special intervention lesson plan that introduced the subject, which would have been reading, the date I was doing it, the intervention program, which would be rewards, and the lesson that I was going to teach, which was 1. But then there are many, many activities because intervention research often shows that short activities that grow in difficulty of content but have a similar instructional routines work particularly well for intervention. And so I said to myself, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to duplicate this for activity A, then activity B, and activity C, and activity D. And, oh my goodness. And that's what the teachers were saying, that this did not match the intervention program they were using. And so I said to myself and to the teachers that let's look at it to see that we are thinking about the lesson, thinking about the objective, thinking about the standards that might parallel it, thinking about how we might do formative assessment, and let's see if they are already infused in the program, and then maybe we can move away from a formal lesson plan. So that's what we did. So all of these 3 little scenarios I'm going to give you. The situation was that I was teaching rewards, a reading program for intermediate students in 5th and 6th grade that's designed to teach them how to read multisyllabic words. And it is very highly structured curriculum. And so the approach here that I suggested was this, that every lesson that they would prepare, they would read it very carefully, but they would read it with their pen in hand, their markers in hand, and they would annotate the teacher's manual. And rather than writing a separate lesson plan, if all the elements are available in it, then let's just be aware of them. Highlight the objectives. Highlight the fact that there is a formative assessment tool. But then the principal said, we still need some documentation. So something that could look like a lesson plan. All right, we can facilitate that. So first we went through the materials to see if the things that we want in every lesson plan were already a part of the program. So, for example, rewards is broken into units, and you look right there, and there are the standards that reflect the content that is going to be taught. Okay, so we already have the standards. We don't have to put them on a lesson plan. Woo-woo, they're there. If you look at this one activity, you see at the top that there are objectives, and then there's an outline of what steps you're going to go through instructionally, and then there is the materials that you're going to use, and then there is a scripted lesson with a overhead displays already prepared. Oh, you say, well, we don't need to have a lesson plan, but I do need to read this, and I need to highlight it and think about it as we go. This is one reason I always say to principals, you're going to have better instruction if the teacher has their own teacher's manual, that you're not thinking we're going to be able to recycle this with another teacher, because they need to highlight it. They need to have notes in the margin. Okay, so many elements are covered, and so this is just another example. Objective is there that we can convey to the students, and there is an activity, and this is teaching vocabulary. They've already picked the words and the definition, and there is PowerPoints to teach it. Oh, I don't need to duplicate all that energy. And the instruction is written out very clearly, more than I could ever write in a lesson plan. And then there is a checkup, which is formative assessment done every 5 lessons. So some programs, particularly research-validated intervention programs, have everything that we would put in a lesson plan. So why would we want to write a lesson plan? But as that principal said, we needed documentation. And so this is what we worked out with the teachers and presented to the principal, that for each of the different intervention groups, and this was for a rewards group, but it could have been used for another very highly structured program, we're just going to have this that is going to be filled out, and the subject is rewards and reading, and we're doing Unit 1 in it, and this group meets 3rd period of the day, and then the students' names are available, and we have the date, and the teacher is planning to teach, let's say, lesson 1, and is in the activities A, B, C, D, E, because they only have 30 minutes and they need more like 60 minutes to complete it, so they're going to do it on the next day. And so that would be written in advance, but the adaptations would be things like students are still making errors on the sounds of the letter I, the sounds of the letter E, Okay, no wonder they make mistakes. They have me as a teacher. And and so tomorrow we need more practice on those. So that would be a reflection piece. And the principal said, makes total sense. Okay, so you're going to have an ongoing record of what you taught, and then thoughtful adaptations that need to occur. And if I open up your teacher's manual, it looks like you've been there. You've highlighted, you've underlined, you have notes in the margin, you know exactly what is happening. You know the path to the outcomes of this program. So there's mostly in intervention, but there are other programs that could use a similar vision. An annotated teacher's manual coupled with a documentation of what was covered. Let me just go back here, though, a minute. Now, the idea of you being able to turn in lesson plans, particularly for intervention, a week or 2 weeks in advance, does not meet the reality of how interventions would be taught. Because let's say that the error rate is very, very high. So I've done a lot of corrections, a lot of practice in that activity, but we don't cover as many activities as we might have. And so it's a good thing I didn't turn this week in 2 weeks ago, because then I would say, oh, I've got to do that, I've got to rush ahead. But no, I need to take it to a level of mastery before we go ahead. So I would actually fill this in day by day. So that it was a record of what I planned to do, and then maybe what I did do, and then the adaptations that I want to occur in the next lesson. All right, so you come from different districts. I'd like you just to take a moment and think of similar programs that could use the same thinking that we just did on that lesson for rewards, a very highly structured curriculum. And I am very curious about level literacy instruction. Good job, Amy, that this would be exactly the kind of thinking you could use for that program. And reading mastery and corrective reading, absolutely. So they're very good examples of where you really have to study the lesson, particularly new formats that are included in it. But it's laborious to write a lesson plan and duplicate what's already there. The SIM reading program, that was the one by John Scheffelbein. You're right on. That would work very well there. Yes, a very good example, the Enhanced Core Reading Instruction, ECRI, which goes with core programs, but it has all the intentionality that we're talking about in terms of lesson plans. And so some documentation of we taught the ECRI in relationship to this lesson in Wonders or journals. You're from Hawaii, so it is Wonders, but it could be Journeys, it could be Benchmark, and let's see, Ready Gen is another one that ECRI is designed for. Beautiful. Okay, that is scenario one. Let's look at an example that, two examples of what I might call lightly structured, meaning that there's more freedom of choice. I could do this, or the wording is not all there, but certainly the step-by-step lesson plan or instructional lessons are there. So this is a simple one. And so it was a school that was teaching treasures, and in it was a spelling activity. And when I went there, this was the designated at the school lesson plan for every lesson that you taught. This is an elementary class, and you know the average elementary teacher teaches 6 totally different lessons every day. So this is a lot of writing out lesson plans, and some of those lessons might even have more than one goal and more than one activity as a result, and so they would have like multiple ones for that. Well, the one that we really talked about was the lesson I was to teach, a 15-minute lesson to illustrate dictation routines in spelling. And when I got this, I said, oh, this is just a duplication of what they have sent me. And they used a model with a pretest and a post-test. And, you know, people always say, should we give a pre and a post-test? Well, if a pretest is given and feedback is given on each word, you've gone through all the words on the pretest, and then you go back and give feedback, and if the students miss it, they cross it out and rewrite it. It does have instructional gains just from giving the pretest and post-test. And then we know that the best practice in spelling would be dictation. So this is what they already, the situation. So I was supposed to teach day 2 of the 4th grade. And it's a very structured curriculum, meaning that it has designated spelling words and instructional routines. So my approach was, well, let's take the words that are in the list and organize them by generalizable elements. So these 3 words all have the sound A in an open syllable. These 3 words all have the sound A in a closed syllable. These words all have the letters. And so organize them so when we do our dictation, we could also work on generalization. And then documentation. Our goal is learning. And so instead of writing out lesson plans, let's make the documentation pre-test, post-test data. The whole goal of this is learning. And if we can show learning using those pre- and post-test data, woo, perfect. So this is the result. And so pre-test, and these words are given right from their reading book. So they had 25 words. But the day I taught, we pulled out the words with a and the words with if, and we did dictation. I say the word, you say the word, then we say it by sound, you write the word, and then I give you feedback. So we wrote it out in this fashion. So now we're prepared for a whole week, and we can use this instructionally for feedback, and it will serve that purpose also. So you have this for a number of days, but then we coupled it with, sort of like you do with Equery, where you have the content and then you have instructional routines. And so these are the instructional routines we use for word dictation and for sentence dictation. And the last thing we did, which is not shown here, is we just had a sheet that showed this week pre-test, post-test, next week pre-test, post-test, next week pre-test, post-test, so that the principal says, we need documentation that you've prepared. Well, look at how much gain we had in terms of the student's spelling from pre-test, post-test. So inherently you would know we prepared. But this is so much better than writing out lengthy lesson plans. This does the trick. I'm prepared. I know the goal. I know how we're going to get there, which is through dictation. I know what the outcome is. I know how we're going to measure it. And so even though it doesn't look traditional lesson planning, it has everything that we need to teach it well. Okay, so here was last spring, a lesson that I was going to teach in first grade, Unit 4 of Wonders. Now, Wonders has an abundance, I'm talking abundance of activities that can be done in a week. And so my situation was that I was going to teach day 1 in a 5-day sequence in Unit 4. And it is a lightly structured curriculum. Now, lightly just meaning that there's more flexibility than in those highly structured ones that we just looked at. So my approach was to do this. 1, they had adopted a 5-day lesson plan, which showed what activities you're going to do on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And they had adopted the one that was designed in California by Achieve the Core. So if you're a Wonders place, go to Achieve the Core. But they also have it for other materials. And thus I could determine exactly what activities all of the 4th grade teachers were going to be doing on day 1 and on day 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, because the materials contained so many elements that we were going to do, instead of writing out lesson plans, I utilized annotation in my teacher's manual, which I could show you the whole thing, but so in my teacher's manual, I found the first activity we're doing. It happened to be a quick review using retrieval practice. So I made a note of that. I highlighted the directions here that they were going to do in phonological awareness on rhyming. I highlighted the examples that here and wrote out the whole thing to me. What words rhyme? Think of another word that rhymes with blank and blank. And then we got down here to the phonics, and I put out here train AI, day AY, April A, as a reminder of the cue words that they were going to use that day. So to me, one of the best alternatives in a structured program would be to utilize annotation. But I also said, as I got into the phonics part of it here, I think I will make some PowerPoints. Now, this is the first time this program was used in the district, so those PowerPoints with the examples I was going to use to teach took me a little while to do. But then I said, I can use them next year. And not only that, there are 5 teachers in first grade. And we could get a pattern, and you could do one, and you could do one, and you could do one, and we could collaborate on it, which is exactly what they did. And in terms of documentation, because this district also requires you have a lesson plan or a document to show you've done it. So we had the 5-day lesson plan, which we just annotated specifically as to that week. Effective, but also efficient. Effective, but also efficient. So I just included that. If you go to Achieve the Core, you're going to find these. And so it says what activities from the program you're going to do on day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you have a choice on 5. And then we just went back and wrote in the page numbers related to the unit, which was Unit 4, Week 1. And so we just annotated this to be our big guide of what we're going to cover. But it's a program where you better read the manual carefully and annotate it. And you might even add specific PowerPoints to go along with it. So that quick review, I simply made this so I could have this on the screen and I could point to one and say what sound, next one what sound, retrieval practice. They have to retrieve it with feedback. And then they introduced 3 ways to make the long sound A and keywords, train, day, and April. And then I had them write AI 5 times and say AIA, 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 and then AY, AYA, 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 and then finally the letter A could be also A. A. It was a thriller. And then words that we were going to sound out. And then I said to myself, well, this is not what Wonders does, but the studies on teaching children to read words where there were vowel combinations, vowel teams, was to first ask what the sound of the vowel was and then have the student sound it out, a pre-correction. So that's why they're underlined. So we can use our own wisdom. Then they had review, and then they had sentences. Now you say, wow, that took a little bit of time to do. Well, it took time once, but they're going to have this program for 5 to 10 years. And so it's going to be all set to go. And if they do it collaboratively, they were only going to do 1 out of 5. And so that would make a big difference in terms of planning. But it's so much more efficient than stopping to write it. Because by the time I write that sentence out, Gail and April like to sail, I've got management problems. So I'm all prepared. We can be much more efficient. Okay, our last example. So the big idea here is flexibility of thought. And this one has occurred so often, particularly at the middle school. So I get an email saying, we look forward to having you come to our school. And in social studies, where they're studying trade, one of the things they're going to do is read about the Panama Canal. That's it. I get the article, which is, I get it sent to you. It is with the possible lesson formats. And the last page has the article. So I said to myself, oh, okay, this is the kind of lesson where you have the text, you have a material that you're going to use, but you don't really have the objectives. What are they supposed to learn from doing that? So also you need more of a curriculum path. So this one, I needed a lesson plan. And so the situation was that this was part of a middle school unit, and I got the lesson. The thing for the lesson was the article, and my approach was to read the article, fill in a formal lesson plan, because I don't have a curriculum material to support it. I'm creating the curriculum material. And that I would also have parallel PowerPoints that I could use in teaching it. And the documentation this time, unlike the other times, the other three examples, is to have a lesson plan. So I took the lesson plan, and you have the complete one on one page in your resources that were sent to you, but this is broken down. So this was actually one that I designed from many examples, particularly an example out of University of Kansas. So Archer is the teacher. The topic is trade in the Panama Canal. And I read the article, and I said to myself, well, they should know why the Panama Canal was built, have an idea of the sequence of attempts to build it, and some of the complications that occurred, and why it's still important today. So those were content knowledge. And the task that we were going to use to evaluate it afterwards is they were going to write 3 paragraphs in which I'm going to give them the topic sentence. So, but now I need to address what we're going to do before they read, during reading, how are they going to be responding, and after reading, how are we going to follow it up. So you'll see that this format, this lesson plan could be used for a read aloud. It could be used when the students were going to read a passage. It could be used when the teacher is going to read a book or article to them. It could be used when they are going to watch a video. It could be used when there is lecturing, but in all cases, we would decide what do we need to do before, during, and after. So this is what I decided that we need to do before, and there's a little hint there. How will the students be prepared for either reading or viewing or listening? Background knowledge, question mark, vocabulary, question mark, previewing, question mark, purpose, question mark. So I decided after looking over the article, what knowledge do they need beforehand? See, I'm going to bet these were students that were in middle school. There's a good probability they don't even know where Panama is, that they don't know what a canal is. Maybe they're thinking a root canal, that they don't know locks, as if to move water up and down. And so there was some background knowledge, and then one word was repeated throughout the article, the word complication, so I taught it directly. So I am thinking here, but for each of these words, I'm going to need the definition, I'm going to need examples, I may even need non-examples to go with the vocabulary, and certainly a way to support the background knowledge. Well, then what are you going to do during? What are the students doing during the reading, the viewing, or the listening? Am I stopping as a teacher and asking them questions? That's the one I just decided to do. I decided to ask text-dependent questions. Maybe we're going to stop and have them generate questions. Maybe they're going to take notes. Maybe they're going to fill in a graphic organizer. Maybe they're going to use getting the gist or paragraph shrinking. So those are just written in as little guidance for us. And then we have what I decided, that I'm going to stop and ask them questions. But notice, with a curriculum is the path to it. The text is just a material. So there's lots of work I have to do here. And afterwards, are we going to discuss it? Are they going to write a summary of it? Are they going to answer written questions? Are they going to compare? Well, here they're going to have a topic sentence, and they're going to complete each paragraph as a summary of what they learned about the Panama Canal. So a formal lesson plan, because there is nothing there. You know, principals often say, well, that's all that teachers need is just to get an article or to get a standard. I unfortunately disagree. I think that teachers need the very best curriculum in science, the best curriculum in social studies, the best textbook in health, the best program in math, the best program in language arts, the best program in reading, because to expect a teacher to not just deliver effectively content, but to design all of it and then deliver it. Yeah, they're professional teachers, but actually the time it takes is so immense that we need to support it at a much higher level so that all teachers, all fifth grade teachers, all eighth grade teachers have the same high standard in their classes. But I could tell because of the amount of time it took me to make this lesson. So before, we learned, where is Panama? Where is the Panama Canal? What is a canal? With pictures. Oh my goodness, I'm getting a better idea of what's happening here because the article has no pictures at all. And where does the Panama Canal go? Well, as a canal, it connects two natural bodies of water, the Atlantic and the Pacific. A map to show it, and to show that there is a lake right in the middle of it. That's a man-made lake, but it would reduce the need to dig out a canal. And so there is the lake, but it's 85 feet above sea level. So a ship coming from the Atlantic side has got to go up 85 feet to match that lake. So they need locks. And so we talked about exactly what a lock was, how it worked. That a ship went in, the doors closed, they locked. The water was raised until it was the next level. The locks opened. The ship sailed into the next one. Water flowed in, raised it up till it was at the level next, and so forth. Pretty, I just look at the picture and I'm still amazed. Because I worked often in Panama, probably 10 times, I stood right here and looked at these locks. And to think that they were completed in 1914, the engineering feat is still amazing. And so we talked about the different ships, cruise ships, cargo ships, and a lot of cruise ships go through there. And you might be interested to know that it's been widened just 2 years ago because the ships are getting bigger. And then we talked about the trade routes and how if we wanted to sell something on the East Coast to Asia, we'd go through the Panama Canal. If we were on the West Coast and we wanted to sell something to Europe, we'd go through the Panama Canal. And just a few notes, but let me go down to the last one. The average cost to a ship to flow through it is $150,000. But when it's totally complete, which will be next year, and the larger ships can go through, it will cost them $1 million to sail through the Panama Canal. $1 million. And still it saves them money because they don't have to go all the way around South America. It is a seventh wonder of the world. And so I instead of putting all of that in the lesson plan, because that would have been inefficient, I popped right over and made a PowerPoint where I had the word, the meaning of it, the question I'm going to ask, the visuals that went with it. And then I introduced complication using the strategy we already know, and the meaning and the examples, and checked their understanding with examples. Then went through, well, what's our learning intention, and what are success criteria, which I put them here rather than in the on the lesson plan. I just said we're going to write 3 paragraphs with these topic sentences, but I put the topic sentences in the PowerPoint. And then I had chosen during that they would answer questions. We're going to read a segment, answer questions, read, answer, read, answer, read, answer, read, answer. And then at the end, they're going to use the sentence starters, and then they're going to write a paragraph, sentence starter, paragraph, sentence starter, paragraph. But this, because it doesn't come with all of the curriculum telling us how we're going to get there, on getting our knowledge on the Panama Canal and its importance, I had to do all the work myself. That's what we need. Teachers, even the best teachers, benefit from really, really good curriculum materials. Many people would say, well, the consistently value-added teachers, they can do their own. Well, the research does not support that. Go back to this book and read it. They found that of the teachers who had consistent high performance from their students, when they had a curriculum material, they got higher performance. So, well, as we come, I see our time is passing by. And what are your conclusions concerning lesson plans? I want you to take a moment and type in what are some of your conclusions from this little trip through lesson plans, could you say? And I'll just give you one right away, is that one form does not fit all situations. Type in what any other conclusions you might have from spending this time together. We need to thoughtfully think through what is necessary requirements when lesson planning. Absolutely. And have some way that we bring administrators in and look at different possibilities for different curriculum that would meet the goals, the intentionality of lesson plans, but perhaps in a more efficient way that improves learning. Because if I don't have to write all of those, for examples on the last one we did, all those definitions and examples in my lesson plan, but instead I have put it in a PowerPoint. I've done the same work, but I have a tool that I can use to teach it. I'm going to improve learning. And it is a thoughtful way of doing it, not just a rigidity in terms of this is what is in our contract. Well, I hope that all of you have a absolutely wonderful, wonderful holiday. And Nicholas, is there anything that we need to know from you?
No, just to know that we recorded the webinar and we'll send it out to everybody. And the next scheduled webinar with Danita is Tuesday, January 15th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Let me just read this last one. Lesson plans are a must. It's just as dependent on whether or not you have a high structured, lightly structured, or no curriculum at all. But we can't just rely on the curriculum. We need to look for those explicit elements to make it more powerful. What a terrific way to end our time together. Now, if you're going to show this to like a small group, I would suggest that you show a little bit of it, stop, and discuss it. Show a little bit, stop, and discuss. Because you would have them right there, and you could even do more active participation. So blessings to all of you. Have a wonderful holiday, and goodbye.